Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you might happen to be. Welcome once again to No Nerd Caliber. It says so right there. The show in which the folks at Nerd Caliber, in this case, this happens to be me tonight, and I'll get into that. We'll talk about things that we really like in various nerd fandoms. Tonight's topic is our favorite robots. Now, to be clear, we would normally have a bigger crowd here, but of course it's end of August. Some cons are sort of coming back, hopefully safely, folks. Wear those masks. So there's con prep going on. There's recovery from cons from the last weekend. People are busy. So it's just me tonight, which means I'm going to go through my count them five, top favorite robots from any kind of media. And by robot, what I mean here and what we mean is an intelligent, artificial intelligence, non-biological, mobile entity. So it has to be mobile, otherwise artificial intelligence computers would count. It has to be non-biological, otherwise any sort of biological organism that is grown or manufactured, replicants would count. And replicants, while they're maybe not fully human, are essentially human. I mean, they're based on a human template. They have blood and hemoglobin, and they have organs like hearts and so on. So, as an example, Bishop from the Alien series would qualify, even though his systems are very wet and sticky, they're all manufactured. That would be like saying the hydraulic fluid in an excavator or a bucket loader makes it organic. It's not. So, non-organic, non-biological entities that have an artificial intelligence to some degree. They can't just be a pre-programmed robot. I guess they could be, but technically that would open up all of the Mars explorers and things like that. So those are our boundaries and our guidelines as to what we mean by robot. I saw we had a bunch of people already jumping in over on the YouTube chat for sure. Haifa, welcome to the show. Rafa, welcome to the show. Rerum Trading, welcome to the show. Ragnarok, welcome to the show. Creeper King, welcome back. And Luminous, welcome back. Hello to all of you. Feel free, as I go through this, either to agree with me, disagree with me, make some points about some of your favorites, or list some of your favorites if they're not on my list, because this is a really hard list to do, folks, to be clear. There are so many amazing robotic characters, and there are a lot that I think some of you out there may think is going to be on this list and aren't. Which isn't a diss to those robotic characters or androids. Androids qualify as well. It's just that, there are so many good ones. All of the ones that are in my top five are kind of my top 1 and 2. So, there you go. Do a real quick check over on some of the other chatty things. Facebook and Twitch. Nothing yet there. Okay. So, let's start. If I can find the right... I'm doing this on my laptop, folks, so I don't have my usual 2 screens, so me bouncing around trying to find the right window for the program that I need next. My apologies. So, my first... I'm thinking is going to be pretty obscure to a whole bunch of people. And that is a really terrible cover painting from one of the books that this character is in, the first book, The Caves of Steel, and that is R. Daniel Oliva. In this image, what you're seeing is R. Daniel holding up his partner, the police detective Elijah Bailey. Basically, because everybody, Elijah and everybody else who live in the cities that, in this case New York, that they live in, suffer from some degree of agoraphobia because they've been living for generations and generations essentially underground. Parts of the cities are actually above ground, but those are completely covered in domes that are completely opaque. Most of them are completely underground. So the story is actually a murder mystery. It takes place about 3,000 years from now. Humanity's expanded out, has achieved some sort of faster than light travel, and has expanded out to a couple of dozen worlds. I think it's 50 in total, nearby habitable planets. So it's not some gigantic galactic empire. But the people who have made these treks out to these other worlds are the wealthiest people on the planet. And the worlds themselves are kept deliberately underpopulated. I think the largest one has like 100 million people on it. People live in big estates and so on. And these spacers that they're called are just filthy wealthy. By contrast, Earth has 8 billion people, all living in these sort of underground or completely covered cities. The spacer economy is essentially built around robotics. The robots do just about everything in the spacer worlds, leaving the spacers to be essentially, dilettantes. Earth has very strong laws against robotics to allow for their population to actually have jobs and things. R. Daniel is one of the most advanced robots ever made and appears completely human. And there are a few of those, so every robot, if it has an intelligence and has a name, has to have the R period designation at the beginning of the name. So it's R. Daniel. So that people can tell that they're robots and not humans. And the story puts R. Daniel, who is working for the Spacers, in the Spacer town, which is, the place where the Spacers are allowed to live outside of New York City, to work with Lige Bailey to figure out who killed a fairly important Spacer. While he was on Earth in Spacer Town. So it's Earth's jurisdiction and their problem. But it's a huge diplomatic problem as well, obviously. So R. Daniel is a really wonderfully complex character. He is, of course, a suspect at times by his own partner, Lige. And he understands emotions, and he actually has a sensor that allows him to read people's emotions from a distance, which makes him a wonderful addition to any detective's tools. But he can be fooled, and is in fact fooled a number of times. But he also places cards very close to his chest. He does not. He's not a Data where he's essentially, a Pinocchio character, and there are some of those, going forward in this particular list. He is much more of a very canny and intelligent, canny, no pun intended, an intelligent detective who doesn't want to give away his hand. And the story is, of course, them solving this. It's the story of the two wildly different cultures sort of coming together, at least in the form of the partnership between Lige Bailey, the human, and R. Daniel, the robot. If you haven't read it, it's 1950s. It's kind of dated, but it's still very, very interesting. I don't want to give any of that stuff away. The few books that were written in this Caves of Steel series get expanded a lot at some point. And it becomes even more interesting in Asimov's greater milieu of work. So R. Daniel, and the reason I had to use that cover is, this is from the 1950s, so if it wasn't a book cover, no movie has ever been made of this. I've seen images from something that I think is a BBC production that looks like it has Peter Cushing as Lige Bailey, and I have no idea who plays Daniel. But they all get the same thing. He has sort of ginger hair, and it's always sort of, slicked back with a very slight widow's peak. So, like the guy you're seeing here in the green T-shirt. So because of that, there are no pictures of actual actors or even animated versions or anything to put up there. So it's book covers or nothing. or deviant art, and I'm not going to steal somebody's deviant art, for the show. So that's my number 5. My number 4, and again, at this point, like I said, they could all be 1 or 2. This is really tough to say this is a number 4. But my number 4 is Ash from Alien. Ian Holm, who played Ash, was pretty much unknown at the time, at least in the United States. He was a stage actor in England. And he brought that skill right out of the gate. You knew there was something wrong with Ash. He certainly seemed like, well, not normal, but, a human being. But boy, there was just something, and so subtle. Ian Holm did an amazing job of just making Ash not quite always right. And ultimately, of course, spoiler for a movie that came out in 1979. But of course, spoiler: Ash, as it turns out, is an android, a kind which will be more widely discussed and explored in the Bishop character in Aliens and Alien movies going forward from that point on. And of course, then the terrible, terrible Prometheus sequels, and anyway, which is not to knock at all Michael Fassbender's performances as David and the other guy. He's fantastic. Wonderful. It's just the rest of the script and everything else about both of those movies were just pure garbage. This wasn't. This was absolutely pinpoint perfect tension, horror, claustrophobic right from the get-go that never let up. And Ash turns out to be this android who has sort of secret orders of his own, and that is to recover this organism that has been discovered in this derelict spaceship and bring it back to Earth at any cost. And something just flew behind me. At any cost, and his statement, the crew is expendable. Fantastic job. Such a complex character, such a wonderful introduction to what androids and robotics are like in the world of Alien, because you don't know at all that he is, in fact, not a normal human until they literally, knock his head off. Well, you get a clue when he starts, dripping milk out of the side of his head, but or hydraulic fluid or whatever that stuff is. But even so, until they knock his head off, and all of his tubes, which would be the nice way to put whatever it is that comes out of him, starts spewing white stuff everywhere. So fascinating character in a wonderful movie, and Ian Holm, of course, just is absolutely perfect in literally everything he does, all the way to Bilbo in the Lord of the Rings movies. And beyond. So, Ash deserves to be, like I said, all of these deserve to be number 2 or number 1, but because a list has to be made, he's number 4. This one also could very well be anywhere on this list, much higher for sure. And this also is a character or a robot that is in part on this list because of the actor. And that is none other than the T-800, the original Terminator, or the original time-traveling Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in, of course, The Terminator. So, the character is just a fantastically realized, emotionless, implacable, unstoppable, killing machine. And yes, you can say that was literally perfect for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He at the time nobody thought he could act, so emotionless was perfect for him. And that's true to some extent, and of course his size definitely plays into it. But Cameron's writing of this, it is one of the most horrifying, frightening portrayals of something that is just can't be stopped. And huge kudos to Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton for selling it hard. You really believe as you go through this movie that they are not going to make it. That they're the heroes, and of course they kind of have to, but boy, do they manage to put the tension, up to 11. And the whole concept of the machines, of Skynet, of the world being taken over in 2029. So we only got a couple of years, folks. Start ditching those cell phones. Anyway, the whole concept of the world and why these Terminators exist and so on is brilliant. I absolutely adore deeply realized science fiction worlds like that, and this is really deep. Just fantastic. And then and again, Arnold, just perfect. The special effects in 1984 blew my mind. Nowadays, the prosthetic head when you see Arnold taking the flesh covering off of his eye, which it's still gross and it still looks disturbing, but it's just so 1984. Again, at the time, just luminous. The original T-800 is wonderfully relentless. I agree, and there, the T-1000, the molten or the liquid metal version, was a very interesting and a good antagonist, but nothing sold that unstoppable, that terrifying, unstoppable machine like Schwarzenegger's original T-800. And nothing since, and which is why they keep bringing him back, whether it's through CGI or whatever, because he is it. He's the top dog in Terminator world. Nothing else is even close to as frightening. So others are very interesting. The Sarah Connor Chronicles, the various T-800 models that were sent back in that sort of branching timeline were really interesting. Not the least of which was, of course, Summer Glau as their female appearing Terminator T-800 model. I agree. Luminous, the original T-800, just wonderful. All right, my next choice is potentially seeming pretty obvious. It is number 6 from Battlestar Galactica. So all of the number series are very interesting characters, but number 6, yes, part of my decision is because it's Tricia Helfer, and damn. Part of it is because an awful lot of the series she spends in that dress, so damn. But it's just an amazing character. Starts out as essentially a spy who basically turns Baltor into the villain of the piece, the human villain anyway of the piece, and is also relentless, but in a much more deeply disturbing way, and not just frightening. For all of the unstoppable big scary guy, there's no way we can stop him, gonna kill us fear that Schwarzenegger's Terminator used, the relentless femme fatale, use whatever tools she has at her hands, unstoppable nature of number 6 is just as strong. Just a completely different way of being unrelenting. Once you then find out even more about history of the Cylons, and even at the end, in its really weird ending of the whole series, she is still a fascinating character. The Cylon, the human appearing Cylon that she is very emotionally complex, but also pretty much always on mission. And that's fantastic. Because there are times when you think that maybe, as emotionally complex as the character is, that maybe she is coming around and she's coming. Nope. That's, she exhibits all of that complexity, but it all comes back around to mission has to go forward. And it's wonderful. Again, a very relentless kind of character. And Battlestar Galactica itself is just fantastic. This is the 2004 reboot, of course. The original I watched because I'm old enough, and it was interesting. It was cheesy, and it was so clearly a Star Wars ripoff that, even at the time, I was kind of like, meh. And then the miniseries that turned into a pilot for the series hit in 2003, and it was so completely different. As an article, I actually think the Wikipedia entry says, they deliberately excised any concept of technobabble. There are no laser beams and things like that. There are no beam weapons. There are railguns, but everything, railguns, missiles, etc. Aside from jumps, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. So, missiles can't get you if you can jump out of the way. Just really wonderful, fantastic, hard science fiction that ultimately turns into really out there, weird science fiction. But still, an amazing series. If you haven't seen it, you also should go watch the Portlandia episode where they decide that they're going to binge just a few more episodes of Battlestar Galactica and ultimately wind up losing their jobs and getting evicted. So, sorry, that's a spoiler for that skit, but it's still very funny. So number 6. Please, more of number 6 or something having to do with that in some fashion. All right, and I knew this was going to be a quick show because it's just me and there's only 5 topics. And plus, the dogs I'm dog sitting for are probably going to start getting antsy in another 10 minutes or so. So we're at our last item, and that is the Vision. Vision is an android, a completely synthetic being, a synthezoid, sometimes called in the comics and in the MCU. And my love for the Vision goes all the way back to his very first appearance in the Avengers. I was a huge fan of the super intelligent, somewhat emotionless characters. Spock always was, still is, my favorite Star Trek character. And the Vision, right out of the gate, became my favorite Avenger. He is ultimately the Pinocchio story, the Pinocchio character of all of these here. It is, his story is growing to be a more emotional being. I mean, he's Data, and Data could have been on this list, of course, from Star Trek Next Generation and the movies and so on. He is essentially Data. He is, the puppet that wants to be a real boy. And that drives almost all of his conflict, whether it's reaching the point where he believes he has the capability to love and falls in love with Wanda Maximoff, which was portrayed wonderfully in the MCU and ultimately in, of course, WandaVision. Or the emotions that he gets when he realizes that, Ultron made him his body is based on the original Human Torch from the 1940s, which was also a synthetic being, and his brain is based on the brain patterns of Wonder Man, Simon Williams. So there's all sorts of complexity about there. Is he in any way Wonder Man? Is his emotions, or are his emotions, particularly those toward Wanda, really just something that Simon Williams would feel? It gets wonderfully complex about identity, about awareness of self, and so on. And yes, there's a storyline in which he is destroyed and reconstructed as the pure white emotionless version of the Vision, which again we see in WandaVision, and so much of WandaVision comes straight out of the comics, just all sorts of mashed together in different ways. And Vision's story is an emotional roller coaster for sure. It can be said very clearly that Vision's problems with handling his emotions, or being an emotional being, I guess, is in a no small part responsible for Wanda's mental breakdown and the near destruction of every superpowered being on Earth. Luminous, solid list. I would pick more TV robots. The giant robot from Johnny Sacco, B9 from Lost in Space, K9 from Doctor Who. Oh, K9. Yep. An absolute win there. Johnny Sacco, I'm not sure if I know that. And of course, B9 from Lost in Space also almost was on this list. If this list was out to 10, two of those would be on here. So that's one of the reasons why I love the Vision. He is a wonderfully deep character that hides his depth in a veneer of emotionlessness a lot of the times. And I like the fact that the writers have both made his growth into an emotional being a positive and explored how that is also a bad thing at times. It's great. It's not just like Data getting an emotion chip and everything is hunky-dory. Although even in Star Trek Next Generation, they play with how that's a problem at times. But always a problem, not like a existential crisis level problem, which is what it usually is for Vision. So Vision, number one on my list, has been, again, since he first appeared in the one of very, very early issues of the Avengers. And that's my list, folks. Wrapping this up within a half an hour, which gives me just enough time to flog our Patreon, if I can find the damn thing. There it is. Patreon.com/nerdcaliber. Folks, if you're watching this and you want to help us do different kinds of videos, more videos as cons come back, get to more cons, do more con stuff, please help us out. Go to patreon.com/nerdcaliber. We only have a couple of tiers. They're both pretty low dollar. We're basically asking you to help us out, and we're not giving away a Polaroids of us or anything, because Lord knows nobody wants that. So our next show tomorrow night is, of course, Nerd Week Live. Nerd Week Live, we're already put in a bunch of interesting topics. Actually, today, just a whole bunch of stuff. And of course, we will be talking about and remembering Ed Asner. Ed Asner did have some wonderful voice work in some very nerdy things. He wasn't just Lou or so many other great characters. But and then of course there's also a lot of other really interesting things. A couple of things just dropped today, so check that out. Full Fat Spoiler Chat this coming Thursday, which would be our show after that, is, I believe, the latest Transformers War for Cybertron, whatever the heck the name of it is. Let me look it up just to be sure here. Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom, which is the third short animated series in this latest run that was done by Rooster Teeth, as I recall. Very interesting. It's an up and down kind of product. Sometimes it's really fascinating. Sometimes it's just, the first run was pretty cool. The second series was good but not great, had some real problems, and I'm hoping they bring it back in the third series. And these are pretty short. I think they're like 8 episodes. So it'll be pretty easy to see it, folks, between now and then. So if you don't mind having it spoiled, or you have seen it and you want to talk about it, that's the show for Full Fat Spoiler Chat this coming week, this coming Thursday. And we will be at Fan Expo Boston Friday through Sunday, the whole shebang. We will be in the Cosplay Contest Judging Room, which is 051, if you are familiar with the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. Show floor, so the bottom floor, the floor that opens out onto Lawn D and so on. On the eastern hallway, or if you're coming in from the front, the left hallway, pretty much all the way near the back, it is one of the last 3 panel rooms, or 4 panel rooms in the back there. Right next to the VIP re-entrance area. So that's where we'll be. We won't be set up on the show floor. So if you are in cosplay and you want to come and get some photos, that's where I'll have my studio set up. If you're not in cosplay and you're going to be there and you want to stop by and say hi, that's where Nerd Caliber will be based out of. And hopefully we'll see a bunch of you there wearing your masks, because I will be masked up the whole time. Yes, I'm vaccinated. But hey, Boston will have an indoor mask mandate at that point anyway, so you're going to have to be. So we'll see you then, folks. Whoever's going to Fan Expo Boston, we'll see you this coming weekend. With that, everybody, please stay safe. All of the people down there in New Orleans who got hit by Ida, and those who are continuing to get dumped on by, it's still a tropical storm, I believe, or at least a bad storm, please stay safe.